Perfect. Okay, thanks everybody. My name's Tom Jeffs, or Thomas Jeffs. I don't mind which, and I'm from a company called Lucidica. And today we're going to be talking about search engine optimization and how to improve your visibility in Google. I typically do this in about 4 hours, so I'm going to go through it in about 30 minutes, so it's a sort of condensed version, but I'm around at the end if you want to ask more questions, but ask questions as we go if you want to go into more detail. A brief slide about us, and we do seminars in full at the British Library. We'll probably be doing a workshop with the Apex Centre as well, so if you do want to know more, then Sandy is probably the best contact to get in touch with. So, essentially, this came out of our attempts to get from page 72 to page 1 within Google, which we did in about 3 months. And we're a small business in the centre of London, this is basically our top tips on how we did it. The number one thing, and it's not technically search engine optimization in the traditional sense at the moment, but the number one thing that we recommend clients is essentially to get on the map. And this has been renamed a few times. Currently it's called Google Places. This is what it looks like, and this is an example of what we did for a client, a business incubator in London. If you're not on Google Maps and you're not in a particularly competitive industry, then you can effectively monopolise the first page of Google inside about 30 minutes. An Accelerator here, who are part of London Metropolitan University, this took us about 30 minutes to set up, and for about a year until their competitors finally caught up with them, they occupied the majority of the real estate for their particular key phrase. There are handouts that hopefully you've all got, and it goes into more details of how to sign up on that. But the most important thing is when you name your company, you put what your company does within the company name. So you don't just call yourself Accelerator. If you're a business incubator, you call yourself Accelerator Business Incubator London. And just doing that one tip, if you're not in a competitive industry on the web, then this can be your sort of beginning and end of your SEO for at least a few months. The next tip I have is to get techie. Now, there's no way around this. You have to have some kind of technical knowledge in terms of what to do on your site. Typically, search engine optimization is broken into 2 sections. There's what's called on-page optimization, which is what you do on your website to make it more visible within Google. And there's what's called off-page optimization, which is what you do outside of your website and other people's websites to make it more visible in Google. Now, the techie bit is difficult. The only thing I can say is get help from whoever designed your website, or these 2 services. They're typically £99 a month, but both of them have a free 30-day trial, which for your on-page stuff is all you need, because you can sign up to SEO Moz or Raven Tools. They'll tell you technically what's wrong with your site, and then you can either implement those changes yourself if you have a way of changing your site, or you can take it to a digital agency or someone else and say, can you do these for me and make it more SEO friendly. Be very, very careful about doing anything outside this. The most important thing to bear in mind with Google is they will spend a lot more time trying to stop you getting around the Google system than you will trying to get around the Google system. And if you're doing something dubious, if you're doing something that isn't just quite right within search engine optimization, then you risk being punished. And we have had clients in the past who have been doing really, really well in Google, and all of a sudden they just disappear. And there's a rule of thumb here. There's something called a webmaster account, which you can sign up to at webmaster.google.com, and you can ask for your site to be resubmitted. And the rule of thumb here is, if Google reply, follow and do what they say. If they don't reply, then it's typically time to get a new website, because there's no way to get back on. So just be very, very careful what you do on your site and whether you're doing things that aren't quite right. I have this expression that I use within pretty much all digital marketing, and that's, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. So just be a little bit cautious about what you're doing technically, but sign up to these 30-day free trials. They'll tell you technically what to do on your site, follow those, and then move on to the off-page optimization. So after you've done the sort of technical stuff on your site, the next thing to think about is links. This is how Google ranks a site in terms of importance. So why does Google think that the BBC is more important than, say, the Hackney Gazette? Because of incoming links, and this is what a link comes from. So it looks like, so here's something from the BBC, and we typically in standard web structure, they're the bits underlined in blue. That's a link. So the BBC is linking out to Channel 4, and effectively it's giving a vote. The more people that link to those websites or your particular website, the more important that Google perceives your site to be, and the higher you rise up within the rankings. Within links, there's a wonderful expression, I think coined by this chap called Kelvin Newman of Site Visibility, called VAR. And when you're thinking about links, you have to think about them in 4 ways. So how Google perceives the importance of your site, first of all, is how many links you've got, which is the volume of your links. So if you have 1,000 companies linking to you, you'll generally perform better than if you have 10 companies linking to you. So the volume is the first thing to think about in terms of these sites linking to you. The next thing to think about is the authority of the page. So someone like the BBC linking to you has an overall better authority than a local newspaper linking to you. So the BBC will give you more of a vote. So that way, if you're trying to get links, then concentrate on the sites that have more authority. The technical term is called a page rank or PR rank, and you can check the page rank of any site just by going to, I think, prchecker.info. But if you type page rank into Google, you'll be able to find a way to check the authority. The third one is the velocity, and this is something that Google's now increasingly concentrating on. And this is not just the volume that you're getting the links, but how quickly you're getting those links. So have you had 20 new sites linking to you in the last month, or have you had 200, or have you had 2? And what you can find is, even if competitors are outperforming you, then you can actually, and they've got such a massive weight, you check out their profile, and you can check out anyone's link profile within SEO Moz or Raven Tools on your 30-day free trial. And you can also do it, typically I think it's like 5 searches a day through OpenSiteExplorer.org, and you can compare your website to a competitor. You can see who's linking to you, who's linking to your competitor, and you can start building up a link profile. So if you're trying to beat a competitor that's got 300 links and you've got 10, you don't necessarily need to get 300 links to pip above them in the Google rankings. You can do it on this velocity. If they've had 300 links for the last year and haven't changed much, and you get 100 in 3 months, then there's a decent chance that you'll flip over the top of them. Even though you've got a little bit less volume, you've got a much higher amount of velocity. And the last thing to think about in terms of linking is what's called the anchor text. And under standard web terms, this is the bit underlined in blue. It doesn't have to be the bit underlined in blue. Different websites denote a link in different ways, but the BBC follows standard structure, and we can see that this link here to Channel 4 is underlined blue text. You hover your mouse over it, this little symbol appears, that's a link. And the bit that's underlined in blue is what's called the anchor text. And this not only gives a vote to Channel 4, but it gives a vote to Channel 4 based upon what it says in the anchor text. So if, for example, Channel 4 were trying to compete on the term inflation or inflation in October, this would be an awesome link because it comes from the BBC, which has a high authority, and it has really applicable anchor text. If Channel 4 were trying to compete on the term News Service UK, it's not bad. I mean, you'll still take a link from the BBC, but what would be much better is if this said Channel 4 UK News Service as the link rather than that specific anchor text. So when you are link building, when you're trying to ask links, trying to do link exchanges with people, when you're building links to your site, then think about that anchor text, think about what the actual link describes, and then follow the principle of VAR, volume, authority, velocity, and anchor text. And as I say, I think this term is coined, and they certainly use it on Site Visibility a lot, by a great podcaster called Kelvin Newman. The next thing to think about is how this ties into your social networking campaigns as a whole. Now, Google has a very, very funny relationship with social networks. So up until June, July this year, they were actually paying Twitter money to have a look at the Twitter stream of information. So every time someone put something in Twitter, Google had more exclusive access to that, and it did affect the rankings. Since Google launched Google+, which for those of you who haven't seen it, is Google's version of a cross between sort of Facebook and Twitter, then they've stopped paying Twitter for that information. But they are still digging into social social networking data. Facebook is a little bit harder for them to penetrate. Twitter, they're certainly paying with less respect than they did, because they're trying to use Google Plus a little bit more. But that said, the big problem with search engine optimization is that really everyone in the world hates it. I mean, for us, it's a necessary evil, and last year, this year to date, 62% of our business has come from Google Organics, and so SEO is an absolute cornerstone for our business. But the problem with search engine optimization is it's massively open to abuse. And there are hundreds of thousands of link building companies throughout the world, typically offshored, typically not doing a very good job, and all they'll do is build links from you. I urge you not to use any link builder outside the UK, because at the best you'll get short-term results. But social networking is where Google wants to move. They are desperate to try and understand how they can pull out information. So what they really want to do is, when you type something into Google, it's the most applicable content. It's the content that people like the most. Now, that's a problem at the moment, because what's happening is it's the people who do the most link building typically, and you've got to do some on-page optimization. So you have to play the link building game, but they are desperate to try and replace link building with what's happening with social networking. And so what they'll do with Google Plus is they'll start looking at what people are clicking on in Google Plus, how you're categorizing content. So just like you can within Facebook build lists, and within Twitter build lists, in Google Plus you can build these circles and label these circles. Every single time you undertake an action within a social network, you give that social network information about whether you like the content, whether you don't like the content, whether it's of value, and you give information about who you publish it to and how you segment your colleagues and the people that you're following. All of that Google wants to feed into search engine optimization, into essentially applicable search results. So you've got to at least start thinking about how you're contributing on social networks and how that ties into your campaign as a whole. And the best way to use a social network at the moment is republishing valuable content, and we'll talk about that now. So one of the cornerstones of our link building strategy is effectively this. It's commenting and producing valuable content. Everything within a decent search engine optimization campaign starts from the cornerstone of content. If you don't have content that people want, then at best you're going to be chasing the competitors that do have content people want. It's as simple as that. And so if you can't create content, if you can't create a buzz and create value, then people aren't going to link to you. And if people aren't going to link to you, at the moment you can try and play the game by building these links, but ultimately Google is going to get cleverer, and it's going to start understanding what people engage with and what people don't engage with. And if your content isn't valuable, people won't engage with it. And if people don't engage with it, social networks will see that, and as a result you won't perform well in search engine optimization. But even at the moment, even just looking at link building rather than what people click on in Facebook and who retweets what in Twitter, even taking aside social networking, then content is still the cornerstone for link building. Because what happens, you build decent content, you build something that people want, and then you promote it using social networking, and then you find that people link to it anyway. So here's an example of what we did, and you unfortunately won't be able to read it very well, so I'll just describe it. So here's a LinkedIn group, and there's two awesome forums to start looking at. For business to business, look at LinkedIn Answers. For business to consumer, look at Yahoo Answers. There are questions in there on pretty much every topic you can possibly think of. So you find a specific topic. So here was a forum, and it says, is it worth buying my small workforce MacBooks when I can get them traditional laptops with a similar spec for half the price? So this is a question that someone is asking for valued feedback on within the LinkedIn forum that we can comment to. So my business partner, his face down here, started contributing to the group and started having a discussion with the people in there of the argument of PCs versus Macs. He then dropped me an email and he said, can you whip up a blog post on PCs versus Macs? So this is what I did. I put in there, I poured as much value as I could into there. So I started putting in the break rates that we have on supporting PCs versus supporting Macs, the cost of support, the life cycles, as much value as I could, and then he posted that back into the forum. And then some great things happened. One is we got links because people looked at this link, this blog post, and were like, that's actually pretty good, and it's a decent article on the pros and cons of PCs and Macs. And so people then linked to it, and people tweeted about it, and people added it to their blog feeds. But we also got people coming to our site who wanted an answer to this question, and they wanted support with their technology. So not only did we get the links, but we got traffic as well of people looking for help with their technology. So we essentially got a double result from it. But you can do this with anything. So it doesn't have to be as general as Yahoo Answers or LinkedIn Answers. It can be your specific industry forums. So whatever industry you're in, there will be a web community, and there will be people asking questions, and questions that you can answer. And one of the main trips that people make in terms of networking on LinkedIn and really on any business-to-business networking is they connect with like-minded individuals. So accountants join LinkedIn forums, and they join other accountants groups. Engineers join other engineers groups, and they communicate with other engineers. The thing is, these aren't your prospective clients. Your prospective clients are someone else, and you don't want. And if your prospective clients are very market specific, it's nice and easy. Go to their forum. If your prospective clients are anyone, then segment your market and write specific content for that segment of the market. So even if you're a B2C consumer, even if you're say Tesco, and you pretty much sell to anyone in the UK, you can still do specific campaigns at teenagers, campaigns at men, campaigns at women, campaigns in specific geographical areas. Find their networking where they hang out online and write specific content for them, and then link to that. The next tip is to get feedback and try and link it back to your site where possible. More and more sites are doing what are called review aggregation. So Microsoft is really leading the way on this with something called Bing Scout. And if you look at the what's in your local area on a Bing Scout platform, it will pull in aggregated reviews, aggregated user feedback from multiple platforms. Google Maps, Google Local on mobile device will do it to a similar will do a similar thing, but to a lesser extent. And this is where, certainly for if your business is geographically placed, this is the way that search is going. It is going for more specific feedback. So when you have 30 reviews, when you have 300 reviews, when you have 3,000 reviews, that is so much more valuable than the equivalent links, because those people have taken their own time to rate you and say whether this is good or whether this is bad. And this now is heavily leveraged on where you appear within Google Maps, and likewise within things like Microsoft Bing Scout. Get feedback, especially if you're geographically located. If you're a restaurant, if you're a hotel, if you're a conference centre, then you need to get feedback and link it to your site. The next thing is a sort of, rather than a tip, is it's a way of thinking in terms of your search engine optimization. And typically what people do with search engine optimization is that they try and do it in a very systematized way, in a very quick way. So what they'll do is, the first thing that I did when we did our link building strategy is I went into our marketing folder and I deleted all of our how to describe Lucidica in 100 words, how to describe Lucidica in 1,000 characters. These things are not random, and what Google is looking for are people trying to undertake systems to link build. And this is why any kind of outsourced link building is problematic, because what those companies do in order to make money through link building is they build up a list of websites that will give you a link from their website to you. They slowly build up that database and they sell that database, or they perform the same links on that database to all of their clients over and over and over again. The problem for this is this becomes your digital fingerprint. This becomes a pattern for Google. So let's say all of us in this room went away and typed in link building companies online. We found the same link building company online and we all used their services in order to build links. Then the link profile to our website, as far as Google would see it, would be almost identical, or would be very, very similar. And Google would then know that each one of us had used the same company for doing link building. Then let's say one of the people in this room did something that they shouldn't be doing and found a shortcut or started linking to people that Google didn't really like. Google now has an intrinsic linking between that person undertaking bad practice and all of us in the room, and that can cause all of us to be punished. And so whenever you're thinking about your link building strategy, what Google is looking for is individual user feedback. And individual user feedback generally doesn't follow patterns. And as soon as you start following patterns, then you're saying to Google, this is a system that's doing it. Whether it's an automatic computer that's building these links for you, or whether it's one of your members of staff, or whether it's an outsourced company who's following this who's following this database of links, whatever they're doing, there is a system behind it. It's not random, and you're therefore showing a pattern to Google. And the worst thing is, your own success can be your worst enemy. So Google's anti-spam team is headed up by a chap called Matt Cutts. He has in the region of 1,000 people throughout the world working for him, and their job is to find people cheating the Google system. And one of the tenets that Google says in terms of search engine optimization is that you shouldn't ever pay for a link. If you're paying for a link, that's against Google's terms and conditions, and they can cleave you from the Google search results altogether. And what happened to a client that came along to one of our seminars? He was sitting there one day with his 6 members of staff. They were essentially an online travel community, rebooking hotels. And all of a sudden the Google algorithm changed one day and the phone just stopped ringing. One day he had a business, the next day he didn't, and there was nothing he could do about it because 90% of his incoming business came from the Google Google search engine results. He was cleaved one day from Google, and that was it. It was time for him to start a new business. So think about any pattern that you undertake in terms of Google. So don't have repetitive anchor text over and over and over again. There's a wonderful tool that Google make freely available called the Google Webmaster Tool. I've mentioned it before. You can get it from webmaster.google.com or google.co.uk/webmaster. And there you can actually ask Google what it thinks about your site. And it will tell you, it now's got the added functionality that it will show you how many people are clicking on your site within the Google search results, where you're appearing within the Google search results. But it will also show you things like who's linking to your site, where the links are going to, whether people are following them. It will show you the anchor text that's used. So, and what you don't want to see is when you open the anchor text, you just have one piece of anchor text. Because people don't do that. When people build links to your website, they say things like, hey, we met these people the other day, that was a really great meeting, and they'll link like that within Twitter. Or if it's on a website, it might be, check out our partner or our friends from around the corner, their website is here. And the anchor text isn't the same thing over and over and over again. And so whenever you're thinking about your link building strategy, make sure you are not giving patterns to Google. And the way to do that is to go down the randomization route and delete anything that's a system. And the last sort of quick tip is get listed. So on the handout there's our top, I think 10 maybe, website directories, but a really great resource for website directories is Vile Silencer. It's got a bit of a funny name, I think, vile.silencer.info, but if you type Vile Silencer into Google, you'll find it. And they now have a user edited, contributed set of directories that some are free, some are paid for, and you can actually pay them to do the directory submissions. I'd probably, unless you're going to do a lot of link building yourself, don't just pay Vile Silencer to do it, because then your link profile is just Vile Silencer. So if you are going to do, I say as a rule of thumb, 75% of your links should be individually user generated, and 25% of your links can be got from directory submissions. So if you buy 400 links from Vile Silencer, that means you're committing yourself to building 1,200 links elsewhere. But as a good place to start, it lists all of these directories, it tells you whether they're free or not, and you can start going in there and submitting yourself to those directories and building your lists yourself. But just to start, then have a look at our the final top tip, gives our top directories. There's contact details about us. If anyone wants to donate to my Movember efforts, then you can do there. And if you have any follow-up questions or anything that springs to you afterwards, then drop me an email. I'm more than happy to provide some tips and answers. And you can contact us by those various methods.
It used to be only a search engine, but being used for business. I think things are becoming pretty tacky. You're quite right. I heard a company who just lost business through Google because they just stopped the company. So what is, just if you want to say 3 things to businesses here, what not to do when putting business on Google, what those 3 things would be?
The top 3 things not to do. The number one has to be don't use an outsourced link building company unless you implicitly trust them, because you just can't get rid of your web history. Your web history is there for the rest of time, and you can see our very embarrassing first websites by going back through our website history from 8 years ago. These things remain always on the web, and if large companies wouldn't undertake it as a link building strategy, then small companies shouldn't do it anyway, for 2 reasons. One is that it will probably get you caught by Google and punished, but more importantly than that, in terms of what are you trying to achieve in your link building strategy? Because let's say it did work. Let's say you employed a link building company in South America who built all of these links for you at $1.50 per link, and it just skyrocketed to the top of Google. And your business, 90% of your business was coming from Google, and your business became a £2 million company, and then you were like, right, that's enough for me, time to exit. As soon as you start getting in investors and try to sell your company, and you say 90% of our business comes from Google, then if we're talking about any serious amount of money, they will get someone in to look at your link profile. And if your link profile says you've used a South American link building company dodgygeezers.com, then that's what it says about your business. And there is now a massive, massive risk that Google could spot this and then cleave you, and then your business is worth nothing. So outsourced link builders are viable, and I'd say that they can and should be used, but before you pay any money at all, because it's not just I'm going to pay this money and it might not work. You might pay this money and it'd be impossible to remove this sort of albatross around your neck forevermore. So be very, very careful in terms of who you're paying money to build links for you. I'd say that's my number one tip. My number two tip is be very, very careful what you do on your site, because what Matt Cutts' team does at Google is they look for outliers. So if you've done some typical things people used to do is, in order to get more of their keywords on their page, they'd have text that was invisible to the eye because it was the same colour as the background text. Now, this was a typical sort of dodgy way of getting more of your keywords on your site. Google spots that a mile off and you'll be punished just automatically. But what Matt Cutts' teams does is, let's say you'd done that and you weren't appearing anywhere in Google. No one's going to look at you. But let's say it for you, or your other link building works for you, or you're doing really, really good. So let's say you get some decent PR and suddenly a load of newspapers link to you and you sort of climb up the system. What will then happen is you'll be flagged to Google as an outlier. Google will say this is a fast riser. They've suddenly got a massive load of new links or a massive load of new authority, and then you'll be logged as an outlier. You'll be flagged up on the Google system, and then one of Matt Cutts' teams looks at your website. If there's some dodgy people who have linked to you and it's sort of a 10% of your link profile, they'll probably go, okay, they might have done something in the past that they're not doing anymore. We won't worry too much about that. But if there's something really, really bad on your homepage, like white text on a white background, then there is no getting around that with Google. You cannot say to Google, that wasn't me, that was someone else, because it's on your website, it's what you have control over, and you will be cleaved. And one of the things that's happened to clients before is you can be inadvertently cleaved. So make sure that your website is secure. FTP, the common way of updating your website, and particularly if your website's built on things like WordPress, Drupal or Joomla, make sure they're updated, because there are servers that look for weak websites and inject malicious code onto that website to try and infect people's machines. When this happens, Google will automatically cleave you from the system. So I'd say, and there's no, I mean, unfortunately, the world of technology on a website is absolutely vast. And I'd say before you undertake changes on your site, just be comfortable with what the company's doing, and follow my expression that if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. And Google have their terms and conditions. It says something like you shouldn't undertake search engine optimization only for the benefit of search engines, and that's how you should think about your site. Why are you making those changes to your site? Is it to try and get more content on there, or is it to basically aid the user? And definitely when you see some websites and you sort of scroll down to the bottom and it's got all of the postcodes that they service, so it's like we service, and then it just lists all of these hundreds of postcodes. They're basically just trying to get into the Google search rankings for their particular service or product, that postcode. It's just not good. Google will spot it, and if you are successful, you'll be cleaved. And I'd say the last thing to be really careful of in terms of what not to do is duplicate content. Google is really, really on the hunt for duplicate content, and we had a client that we did some consultancy for about a month ago. They were top of Google, sailing high, and then all of a sudden their developer was doing some testing around some of their content in terms of venue reviews, and he duplicated it on another site. Google crawled it, and Google Google knocked them about 12 positions down the Google rankings just like that. Now, it wasn't disastrous for them. It just meant they had to supplement their traffic now with Google AdWords. That one mistake cost them about £22,000 in Google advertising. They took that duplicate content off. They did what's called a 301 redirect back to their homepage, and in about a month, Google put them back to where they are. Google doesn't like duplicate content. It likes to know where the original source is. And this is why you've got to be a bit careful in terms of outsourcing your blog postings, because generally they won't help you and they might even punish you. And Google has an idea of where the original content was published. But let's say one of the examples I have is a guy came along to the seminars, music journalist, and he managed to get some of his content published by NME. Now, when NME put a new piece of content on, within about a day Google indexes that. When he puts a piece of content on his site, it could take a month before Google finds that on his site. So the problem he was having was that Google was perceiving he was taking NME's content when in fact it was the absolute reverse. And so the way he solved that is by totally writing a new abstract for NME and then linking to the original content on his site rather than copying and pasting between sites.